Welcome to Fundraising Stories with Female Founders. I'm Julia Elliott-Brown, the founder and CEO of Enter the Arena. I'm a serial entrepreneur and an expert in raising investment and business growth. Our mission at Enter the Arena is to empower female founders to fly through pre-raise and investment and onto the exponential growth of their business with investment expertise and business coaching. Here we share the stories of inspirational female founders who've raised investment to inspire you to do the same. You'll hear their honest accounts of what it was really like to secure funding, the highs, the lows, and the challenges they experienced on the journey. And along the way, we'll discuss top tips for how you can be successful too. Today I'm speaking with Lucy Hall, the co-founder and CEO of LOANHOOD, the fashion rental marketplace for the next generation. LOANHOOD is a peer-to-peer fashion brand with a difference. It's gender inclusive with a focus on emerging designers and independent brands. Now, before Lucy founded LOANHOOD in late 2019, she had a long career as a model agent, so plenty of experience in the fashion industry. Plus, she'd had entrepreneurial experience before with her farm to fork restaurant in Covent Garden, which is where sustainability really became front of mind for Lucy. Now, Lucy recently raised £260,000 in seed funding for LOANHOOD, which I think was a little bit of a rollercoaster ride. So let's meet Lucy and find out what happened, what she learned from the experience, and her top tips for you on raising investment. So welcome, Lucy.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm a big fan of the podcast. I actually listen to pretty much all of your episodes, and it's quite a big deal for me to actually be on the show. So thanks for having me.
Oh, that's so lovely to hear. That's so lovely to hear. More and more we hear that, in terms of how important it is for founders to kind of be inspired and learn from others. And honestly, it's such a pleasure then when you go on to raise and we can get you on the show. So
yeah, it's such a valuable tool because you learn so much from other founders. So yeah, I recommend everyone listens.
You do. Well, thank you, Lucy. So all right, let's hear a bit about your story. So, okay, it's a bit of, you've got lots of experience in the fashion industry, but it's still quite a leap, isn't it, to go from being a model agent to launching a fashion swap platform. So how did that all come about? What made you want to start LOANHOOD?
Yeah, I think when we first started the business, we were building a fashion brand and we quickly realized we were building a tech company. So that was definitely an interesting eye-opener for us. But my co-founders and I had been working, all of us in the fashion industry, and could see firsthand the detrimental effect it was having on people and the planet. And like you mentioned, I went off and opened a restaurant, and that's really where sustainability became front of mind. And you could see that connection between eating organically, eating seasonally, eating locally was better for you and better for the planet. But that connection with clothes, we just don't have. And after selling the business and going back into the fashion industry, I knew that I couldn't just sit and continue to be complicit in encouraging people to consume more and more. And that's when Jade, my co-founder, who was actually a long-term friend of mine, she was actually one of my models when I started out in London as a model agent. She'd gone back to uni. She'd been a really successful model, but working for lots of fast fashion brands. So she had seen, when she'd started shooting for ASOS, say, she was shooting like 10, 15, 20 looks a day. And by the end of her career, she was shooting 100 looks a day. It was getting like completely out of control. So she was like, I need to go and do something different. So she went back to uni and did her master's at LCF, London College of Fashion, in fashion futures. So they were, debating and exploring what the future of fashion really looks like. And that's when she came to me with this idea of a peer-to-peer rental marketplace. We're already doing rental in the fashion industry. People, when they're on the red carpet, they're not buying those outfits. They're renting them from stylists. So how could we make that more accessible and more inclusive to more people? So it's a bit like Airbnb, but for your wardrobes, and having come from the fashion industry, or like most women, generally more women, is that we have a plethora of clothes in our wardrobes that we don't often wear. I wear this jumper pretty much every other day, but I have another 20 in my wardrobe that I just don't seem to get out. So it just felt like so wasteful to us to have all these clothes in our wardrobes and just not doing anything. So how could we reduce production in the fashion industry because that's where the emissions are coming from, but increase utilization of things that are already in existence. So we were, going back and forth about this idea. We went to one of our friends, Jen, who's a graphic designer, like, oh, what do you think? And she was really passionate about sustainability. And that's where LOANHOOD was really formed. And that, like you said, was 2019, but actually the business didn't really start until kind of 2021 because the pandemic hit. I had a baby. We all kind of went off and did other things and then reformed post-pandemic to really propel the business forward.
I mean, it's insane, isn't it? The fashion industry. It's insane.
It's
insane. And you're so right. I was actually thinking how much I was just shoving like yet another jumper into my wardrobe this morning. And it's really bubbling up, isn't it? This whole kind of sustainability and particularly clothes swapping, and I've seen lots of startups in this space. It's really, really exciting. What makes LOANHOOD different, would you say, in terms of, what's going on in the innovation and in the swap market?
So yeah, we started out doing these clothes swaps in person and really testing that idea of circular fashion and making it really accessible. And whilst we were doing this, we saw other platforms coming through like Her Collective and By Rotation, who are really focused on this kind of female, millennial, going to weddings, occasion wear. And we saw a massive gap in the market for Gen Z. And coming from the model industry and all of us having experience with a younger emerging talent, we were like, this is people are missing out. We need to target Gen Z. And we know that through working with these younger people, we can make the most impact because they're the change makers. They're the ones that are actually going to change the fashion industry. It's such an opaque industry. There's so much smoke and mirrors and it's very archaic. The people that run the fashion industry have been doing it for decades. We need this fresh talent that are coming through. And what we know with Gen Z is they're very passionate and demand sustainability. And they want this kind of connection and community that we saw through the rise of Depop. They're building and changing the fashion industry. They want to be the fashion industry. So we knew that by targeting them, we could make the most impact. And of course, they're very gender fluid. So that was something that was really important to us. We don't lead with gender. We leave it open to them. We have lots of gender neutral collections on the platform. And that led us into having a real skew towards emerging designers and independent brands because they are fresh to the fashion industry where we have a lot of experience. We can give them guidance. We can tell them how to write their bios and we can introduce them to fashion editors. We've just created this amazing lookbook for Fashion Week. So we're putting them in front of people that they wouldn't normally have access to. So some of our kind of pillars are sustainability and community, but also education and entrepreneurship, because we're passionate about educating honestly and truthfully to the next generation about the circular economy and how that can really make a difference.
It's very powerful. And actually, as you say, you are building a tech company, but your understanding of your consumer market and your understanding of brand is just as critical. So you have to be really good at both of those things, don't you, to make this work?
We're really lucky that Jen is a graphic designer by trade, but she is a brand builder. That's what she does. That's why our brand is so strong, because she really gets it. She really understands the typography and the colors and the imagery. So yeah, we're very lucky to have Jen.
All right. So let's talk about funding. Funding.
Yeah, the less sexy side of the business.
The less sexy side, but unfortunately the very, very important side, because without funding, you can't make it happen. So how did you start?
But it's a very small business. It's a very, mom and pop kind of style business. So you have to understand that at the beginning of your journey. Do you want to be a big business or are you happy being really small? I think people don't often have that decision making early on.
That's true. That's true. And actually, even if, you're looking to build a lifestyle business, which is absolutely nothing wrong with that, it's still often hard to get that off the ground without some kind of funding, because we all have to eat and pay our rent or whatever. So there's usually some kind of funding, but you're right. High growth is a whole different kettle of fish when it comes to fundraising. But you started off with kind of friends and family and a rewards-based crowdfunding campaign, didn't you? So tell us about that.
Yeah, so we after the kind of close swaps were taking off, we quickly realized that we wanted to target Gen Z, and therefore we needed to build an app. And, people were quoting us 100 grand to build an app. We were just like, this is unrealistic. We just don't have access to that kind of money, especially very early on in our journey where we weren't thinking that much about investment, and it was very much a scary prospect. So like, how could we bring money into the business? The close swaps are making us money, but we looked at Crowdfunder UK. We were looking at Crowdfunder and Kickstarter, but we heard from a few different founders that Kickstarter was much more skewed towards men. And we were like, okay, well, let's try and focus on Crowdfunder UK and see where that takes us. So we raised 14,000, the rewards-based crowdfunder. And it was a real journey. We did the video ourselves. We built it on Canva. It was still kind of just at the end of the pandemic, so we all filmed it remotely. It was definitely a funny experience. We posted like 50 times in 30 days on social media. We were constantly just messaging people. Luckily, we got a £5,000 grant from NatWest to back her business, which had actually just closed. And we were like, oh, gutted, we've missed out on that, after like hoping we were going to get it. And then they called me and were like, oh, we've actually got like a couple of allocations left. So that was a real godsend at the end of the crowdfund, because you have those real waves in crowdfunding where it's a big peak at the start and everyone's really excited and everyone's investing, and then the middle is nothing is going on. You're not getting any pledges, and it's like, oh god, we're never going to make this target. But yeah, we smashed the target, and I think we put 10,000 down, but we actually hit 14,000 in the end.
And that
was great.
And that 14,000 that you get, I mean, so what are you giving them in terms of rewards? Because it's usually not money that just goes straight into your business, is it? You've got to use it to actually deliver something back to those people who've pledged. How did you structure it?
And that was really difficult for us because we don't own any product. We are a peer-to-peer community, so we don't have anything to give, and we didn't have a platform at that point. We didn't have a website or an app. We were just kind of telling people, we will have something in the future, and you can have a free rental once the website is live or once the app is live. So we did free rentals, and we also made some merch. So we had some posters that like keep fashion weird and some slogans on it. Then we were doing virtual coffees. We had some like bigger pledges where it was like meet the founders and like learn about our journey a bit more in person, or take you out for lunch. But that was it was really difficult for us to build those rewards out, because most people have a product. So like Panty, who is the great sustainable underwear brand, they did crowdfunding because they wanted to build out their product range. So people were pre-buying their underwear. Perfect sense. For us, it was a bit like, oh, what can we offer, like a sustainable wardrobe edit? Or but I think a lot of people in this kind of early stage of crowdfunding really just wants to support, rather than we want to get a reward. It's more about they see potential and they want to support you on your journey, especially if it's about sustainability. So people are often just putting money in and not asking for anything back.
So that's actually, in your case, almost, dare I say it, like a charitable donation.
Yeah, it was.
Was it worth it?
It was definitely worth it, because it opened our eyes to crowdfunding in general, and it helped us establish our community a bit better. And those people are still with us now. We built relationships with them, like, because of course we were so grateful, and we posted about them on our Instagram, and we really built relationships, and a lot of them were from industry. So like I won't give examples actually, but yeah, we had some great people support us that are still supporting us now.
That's great. Yeah, and building that community is a really great way to start, isn't it? So, but I can't imagine £14,000 got you that far, because I know how quickly this money goes through your fingers, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't too long before you were thinking, right, we need to go out and raise some more serious money. And given you'd had that experience in crowdfunding, that was where you thought you would go next, wasn't it?
Kind of. So we looked at the different options. So we knew we needed to raise what we thought was a seed round, and we took some advice, and actually it was quite bad advice looking back now, about like what we should value our company at. And we'd only just tested the app on a few people. We had a really small community of 100 people on the app. There was loads of bugs. It wasn't really working. And one of our advisors was kind of saying, like, we need to start raising, like, you should set your valuation at 2 million. like, what? Okay, unsure. And like the more research you do, it's especially when you're looking at the UK versus the US, there's such a gap between those kind of valuations. What they value a company at in the US and what you can value it here in the UK is totally different. They have a much higher tickets in the US and less risk averse, and they're all about the tech and big scale. And here in the UK, it's a little different. So I think we decided to go out and raise a seed round, which actually turned into a pre-seed round. We set the valuation at 2 million, trying to raise 400,000. And just from the get-go, we were talking to VCs, and just from the get-go, everyone was like, no, you're not ready for this. This is no, that you haven't got any traction. Like, you're trying to and this person that was advising us was like, oh, you can do it. You can. So I spoke to like 50 to 75 people, and all of them were just like, you're getting wrong advice here. And we can tell you, as a VC, we see a lot of people that are agreeing to the industry, and we can tell you, you need to go back to a pre-seed, look at your valuation again, come back to us when you have more traction, like keep us posted. And like, there was some really good advice from the VCs that I spoke to early on. But then we went, this is not right. Like, stop. Looked at our deck again. Our deck was about 30, 40 pages long. The messaging wasn't right. There wasn't any clarity. So that was really tough, because it really disheartens you, and you think, God, we have no idea what we're doing. This is never going to happen. But then things started to slot into place, and we went on like an accelerator, and we spoke to some more friendly investors, angels, that were like giving some guidance, giving us feedback. And what everyone always says when you're raising money is, ask for advice and you might get investment. Ask for investment, then you get advice. So we were lucky that we got a lot of advice from some friendly investors. And then I just went on a rampage of talking to different founders, and that was so valuable. I spoke to you early doors as well, actually, which was really useful. But yeah, talking to other founders, because they get it. They know exactly, they've just been through it themselves. It's so valuable to get some like real insight into their journey, their connections, what worked for them, what didn't, where to go, especially as a female founder. I spoke to both male and female founders. But yeah, the female founders as well are like, I get it.
Just a very quick break in today's podcast. If you're enjoying listening to fundraising stories with female founders, then I think you're going to really enjoy my new book, which is called Raise, the Female Founder's Guide to Securing Investment. If you would like to know more about raising investment, what it takes, everything about the ecosystem and how it all works, from crowdfunding to VCs, angels, if you want to know how to reach investors, how to have meetings with them, how to talk through your financial forecasts and put together your pitch deck and negotiate an amazing deal, then everything you need to know is in the book. It covers the 5 steps to fundraising, and also covered over 30 case studies of incredible female founders, many of whom have been featured in this podcast, sharing their tips and experience about how to raise investment. It's available on Amazon. You can get paperback, hardback, or Kindle copies. And I think you're going to find it invaluable as you think about and plan for your own fundraising journey. Yeah, I mean, God, that community of your peers is so important. Isn't it a shame that you didn't get your hands on a copy of my book when you were doing all of this at the beginning? Because I haven't written it yet. But yeah, and you know what? I mean, it's if you've never raised investment before and you don't have that kind of correct advice and support, these are easy mistakes to make. I made them myself. When I raised a couple of million for my last business, but originally made that same error of going to the VCs, probably not as early as you, but quite early on. And that's a lot of conversations for you to have. You've got those relationships now for the future, so you didn't completely waste your time, but I imagine an awful lot of time spent, which you could have used in other ways if you could go back again.
Yeah, because you're trying to run a business and then trying to we can just do some fundraising on the side. Like, I didn't realize how much work it actually takes to raise a round, and you have to dedicate your time to it. You can't do it on the side. I was trying to do it I'll just do a few things in the night time. I'll reach out here. I'll start a spreadsheet. And it's like, no. This is a serious game. Like, you need to be very focused on it. Yeah, I mean, it should be, if you need to raise investment, you've got to put it number one on your priority list.
because if that investment is what's going to make your business a success, but also sometimes without that investment your business will fail, then it has to be number one. But there's three of you, right? So how did you divvy up your roles when you were doing that raise? Because then you were obviously trying to speak to angel investors. How did you do that?
It was kind of just a natural progression. So Jade is doing her PhD as well as doing LOANHOOD. So she's a very busy girl. And she is much more leans towards the community side of things. And she has some kind of innovation experience with the fashion innovation agency. So she was kind of leaning towards the tech. So she looks after the product and the community. Jen, being a graphic designer and a creative, she was started leaning towards the marketing side of things. And then I'm very much a kind of numbers, spreadsheets kind of person. And I was very interested in learning about investment. So that it all kind of just fell into places. But that's a couple of years ago. It's taken us a long time to really like bed into our roles. And we learned on the job. So that's really tough. Really hard, because you just think, God, if we could just hire somebody that knows how to do this stuff, it would be great.
Well, that's one of the things that funding can allow you to do, isn't it? Is bring in people.
Yeah. And when you see other people raising hundreds of thousands of pounds all the time, and you're getting told like, oh, they've raised this and they've raised that, you're like, oh God, it can't be that hard if everyone's raising so much money all the time. But you don't hear about the hundreds and hundreds of other people that aren't able to actually raise the rounds. So yeah,
exactly. And none of those rounds would have been easy to raise. I mean, there's always a lot more to it. Not everybody is completely honest about the experience, except when they come on this show and then everybody tells me all the warts and all stuff. So three of you, and when you're going out to speak to angel investors, that's a lot of networking, isn't it? What was your strategy on building out your network of potential investors?
Quite methodical. It's like going through LinkedIn basically and getting intros from as many founders or angels I spoke to who said it wasn't right for them. Can you introduce me to somebody else, etc. But this is kind of, because it's post the pandemic, a lot of it was done on Zoom. I didn't meet many people in person. Our lead investor, who was obviously the game changer, we didn't meet him in person for like months after he'd invested. We just did it all online. Should I go into getting the first money in the door? Yeah.
So let's talk about the first investor you managed to secure, your lead investor, because that person is often the real keystone that can make everything else in your campaign work. It's a bit like Domino Rally, isn't it? Once you got the first person. How did you do it, Lucy?
After, reaching out to hundreds of people on LinkedIn, the cold messages day in, day out, and getting no responses, or getting a call and nothing coming from it, Mark actually came to us, which was, mind blowing. So it was just, Jade had actually done a podcast or a presentation or something for part of his company during the pandemic. He'd reached out to her and said, can you sit on a panel for us? She said, yeah, of course, no problem. And then he'd seen that she was raising, we had it all in our LinkedIn, raising our SEIS. And he'd reached out and said, oh, can I have a chat? So Jade and I jumped on with Mark and we spoke for an hour. And it was just very much like, just a bit of a random person. So we're just chatting, being very honest about our journey, where we were at, and An hour later, he was like, well, I think it's a great business and I'd love to be your lead investor. And we were all like, what? Like this, we hadn't even gone into that meeting thinking this is an investor call, and like trying to play it cool, like that'd be great. I'm like, oh, he's like, have you got a deck? I'm like, yeah, we've got a deck. We've been sending it to every man and his dog. So he was like, great. Like,
I was just going to say, the point there, which I think is really interesting, is the fact that you publicly put on your LinkedIn profile that you were raising. And I see so many founders not doing that because they feel like they just want to keep it all a bit under the radar. But if you do that, it's going to be a little bit slower in some ways. Just, you've got to put your head above the parapet.
Yeah.
And not feel this feeling of shame that you're raising investment. You should be proud and excited that you're raising investment, and be prepared to tell everybody, because then who knows where it's going to come from, right? Which is what you found.
Exactly. It was in our titles, we are raising SEIS. And I understand why people don't want to put it in there, because if they don't hit their target or they don't do it in the end, then it's like, well, then you have to like take it down. But I think you just have to go for it. Just really go for it. Put yourself on the line and say, this is us. We're raising our money. Do you want to be involved? This is a really exciting business. We're passionate about what we're doing, and we know that there's huge gains to be made for investors. So, just get on board. So Mark was instrumental in changing the whole round for us. He's like, your valuation should be 1.25 pre-money, and I will lead the round. I'll bring in my other business partner. So he'd exited a business years before with his business partner, Alex, who's also, they're both like our lead investors. They put the 150K SEIS in. And then he started introducing me to his network. And from that, like you said, the domino effect, people just start coming in. Yeah, you've introduced to us from Mark. We'll invest. And then other random people start coming in. You're like, oh, great. And we raised most of our money in August, which everyone says, don't raise in August. And we got a lot of our money through. So we raised the first 75 in March before the tax year, then the next 75 after the tax year for their SEISs. And then, through the summer, we kind of raised some more into September from another 6 angels.
I mean, to be fair, it was a weird summer because we were in lockdown and all that kind of stuff. So August wasn't like a normal.
No, this was last
August,
year. This was last year.
Oh, okay.
But yeah.
That's normally it's quite tricky in August because everybody goes on their holidays.
Yeah, it was in between people's holidays, in between my own holidays. People were like, oh, jumping on a call, like, yeah. And I just kept calling my business partners going, someone else has invested, like, this is amazing. And it just just feel like kind of like the pressure just going, oh.
Yeah. But that validation from Mark, I mean, that sounds like an absolute game changer.
100%.
Yeah. So what about the crowdfunding then? Because I know that was something that you were looking at doing. Yeah. Where did that fit into the journey? What happened?
So we were really keen to do crowdfunding because it aligns with our values of community. We wanted to give a piece of our business to our community. What we now know is that our community is really young. They're all kind of Gen Z, and potentially investment is not on their radar. And also what we learned about, we did a Seedrs round, was that you really needed to have your full round closed. So we were raising, I remember what we were raising at 400,000, and we needed to have all of that money. Basically, you want to be going into a crowdfund with 90%, 95% funded pretty much. And we weren't, we were at 65%, and we had 50,000 committed by a fund. And we kicked off the crowdfund, and you've got like an influx of people, and got some great investors backing us. And then the 50K just dropped, was not going to happen. And we were just like, oh, shit, what are we going to do? So we'd put a lot of time and energy into it, but we'd kind of made the decision to do the Seedrs round quite quickly, and moved very, very fast to put a video together. We'd got a professional video done and get all of our assets and our like pre-reg, everything set up quite quickly. So it felt like we were on a bit of a train going really fast, like, okay, and then it opened on a Friday night at 6 p.m. because there was loads of issues with you have to have everything approved with crowdfunding. So anything you say has to be approved, and all documentation. And the person that was assisting us from Seedrs was actually on holiday, so we had somebody different. And they set it live at 6 p.m. on a Friday, which is just a nightmare, as you can imagine. Literally the worst time you can go live with a crowdfund. So after the first week, we realized we weren't going to get this 50K. So we had a decision to make. It was either we put like every ounce of time and energy into closing this round, or we just close it early. And we spoke to our investors, and had a discussion amongst the co-founders, and we just made a pretty quick decision just to close it. There was no point. There's no shame in that. I think a lot of people like, oh my God, if you close your round early, no one's ever going to invest in you again. It's like, no, we made a decision and we stuck by that, and it was an informed decision. That's it. It's done. It didn't work out for us this time around, so fine. And that 50,000 still hasn't dropped. So, we could have been waiting for weeks and weeks and weeks.
I mean, I had the same issue with, when I was crowdfunding for my last business, second crowdfund, lead investor who put a serious commitment in, then pulled out while we were live, and exactly the same thing. We had to take the decision to close it because we just could see the writing on the wall, and you can't keep going. So I've been there.
Yeah.
And it's tough at the time, but it's the right decision, because you just, there's no point in banging your head against a brick wall, is there?
Exactly. And it's time away from your business, and you just have to be honest with yourself. Like, I can put every hour, minute of every day into trying to raise this money, but I don't think it's going to work in this short amount of time. So it's better it was just before Christmas, so it's like, we're going to extend it over Christmas period. I was just like, I just can't even face it. It's just like soul destroying to do that. So we were like, let's back away quietly and refocus in January, which we've had an incredible January 2023, where we've just, really realigned our values and our roadmap for the next couple of years, and we feel like reinvigorated about the business.
Yeah. And you can go back to a crowdfund later, maybe, if it's right. I mean, will you, and you've done most of the work, so it's just about updating it. I mean, are you going to be raising again soon?
Yes.
Do you think? Yeah.
Well, obviously the way that the markets are at the moment, and from what we're hearing from a lot of investors, is that 2023 is not a great time to raise. I think everyone's wants to see businesses being self-sufficient, and that's something that actually we really want ourselves. You can get on this kind of roller coaster of raising and raising and raising and go. And it's like, but is the business actually profitable? Is this business viable? So I think that's something that potentially women think about more than men, who are less risk averse, and we want to make sure that we have a solid foundation for this business. And we know that the rental market is very much in its infancy, and there's lots of issues around logistics, and it's a total mindset shift and behavior change. So I think it will take a few years for it really to take off. So during this time, we've built the rental marketplace app. We've established ourselves as a swap business in person, with contracts with Hackney Council and private clients like Matches Fashion. And we want to grow the B2B side of our business, which I feel like a lot of people are doing in 2023, because consumer facing is quite tough. The cost of living crisis, etc. So we really want to, build the foundation of the business, get a really good recurring revenue coming in from our events. And that's part of our education piece, because we want to long-term embed circular fashion into every part of people's lives. And that means from the workplace, having clothes swaps or fashion rental pop-ups in people's workplaces, to having an app on their phone, to having resale and retail on our website. We want to be the number one destination for circular fashion. And that's what keeps us going, gets us excited again. And when we do raise our seed round, either later this year or into 2024, we'll be in a really positive place, and that money will go towards, high growth, rather than like, just keeping us going.
Yeah, that's right. That drip feed feeling of, which is hard. That's the challenge, isn't it? Is to make sure you raise enough to make a meaningful difference, get to the next milestone, so that when you do another raise, you're in a great position. And I think that's one of the mistakes that many founders make, is they do a modest fundraise. They find the experience so horrific, they just put fundraising out of their mind, they get on with building their business, and then all of a sudden they look in the bank account and go, oh no, I've got 2 months worth of cash left, I better go out and raise. That is a terrible position to be in. Position to be in. So, in many ways, you're always fundraising, even if your raise is not actually open right now. You're building those relationships, you're working on it, keeping your existing investors warm, all that stuff.
Exactly. We have a spreadsheet of investors that we've spoken to, and we're starting to do like a quarterly update of where we're at and keeping them interested. This is what's happened. These are the kind of milestones that we've hit, etc. So when you do go out to them for the raise, it's much easier. You've built that relationship. They've understood your journey. You're not kind of going in cold about who you are and what the team is and what you expect to see in the coming years.
Yeah, really important. Well, it sounds like you're thinking about it really strategically. So that's really
what
important.
We've learned.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with such honesty. so important that people understand what really goes on a raise and the challenges that you face and how you can overcome them or not. Check out LOANHOOD because it's great. Thank you, Lucy, for being here. It's been lovely.
Thank you so much for having me. And if anyone wants to reach out, please shoot me an email, lucy@loanhood.com.
Thanks for following Fundraising Stories with Female Founders. This content is all provided to you for free, so if you've enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe so you never miss another one. Enter the Arena has helped hundreds of female founders fly through pre-raise and investment and onto the exponential growth of their business. Our first-hand experience, expert guidance, and proven programs help female founders unleash the Wonder Woman inside. To see if we can help you do the same, head over to www.enterthearena.co.uk. I'm Julia Elliott Brown, and I look forward to talking with you soon.